She told everyone her marriage was open. She told everyone she was free. What she never told anyone was what her husband was planning the night he decided she had gone too far. It was just after 6:40 in the morning on March 3rd, 2021, when a 911 call crackled through the dispatch center in Tarrant County, Texas. The caller was a man named Brandon Meave. His voice was measured, controlled, unusually so for someone who claimed to have just discovered his wife unconscious on the bedroom floor. "She won't wake up," he said, "but I think she had too much to drink last night." When paramedics arrived at the suburban home on Clover Ridge Drive in Mansfield, they found 29-year-old Makayla Meave lying on the floor beside the bed, cold and unresponsive. She was wearing the same clothes she'd gone out in the night before, a floral top and jeans. Her phone was beside her, screen cracked. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the nightstand. By the time first responders had her on a stretcher, Makayla Meave was already dead. The question that would consume the next 2 years was not whether she was dead. It was whether her death was an accident or a murder dressed up to look like one. The wine bottle had no fingerprints on it, not one. The Mansfield Police Department, a modest department better accustomed to traffic incidents and domestic disturbances than homicide, called in the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office almost immediately. Makayla's body was transported for autopsy. Brandon Meave, 33, sat in the living room of his home and gave investigators his account, calm, cooperative and, as detectives would later say privately, too rehearsed. He told officers that he and Makayla had an open marriage. He said she had gone out the night before to meet someone, he didn't know who. He said he had gone to bed early, heard her come home sometime around midnight, and assumed she had gone to sleep in the bedroom. He said he found her on the floor when he woke at 6:30 a.m. It was a clean story, too clean. And in homicide investigation, clean stories almost always have dirty foundations. To understand what happened inside that house on Clover Ridge Drive, investigators first had to understand the woman who died there. And what they found painted a portrait of someone caught between the life she was living and the one she desperately wanted. Makayla Lynn Meave, née Horton, had grown up in Burleson, Texas, the second of 3 children in a tightly religious household. Her childhood friends described her as kind, artistic, deeply sensitive, someone who felt everything harder than most people. She had studied graphic design at Tarrant County College and met Brandon Meave at a mutual friend's barbecue in the summer of 2014. They married 2 years later. On the surface, the marriage looked functional. They had a house, 2 dogs. Brandon worked in logistics management, Makayla did freelance design work, and in recent years had begun exploring her identity with a new intensity. Friends said she had started questioning whether the marriage, structured, traditional, constrained, was really the life she wanted. In the months before her death, Makayla had been confiding in her closest friends about something her husband had agreed to, something that changed everything. According to multiple friends who spoke with investigators, Makayla told them that she and Brandon had agreed to open their marriage in late 2020. She was enthusiastic about it, excited even. She had downloaded dating apps. She had been seeing someone, a man she referred to only as D in her messages, for approximately 6 weeks before her death. But those same friends told detectives something else. Something that made investigators stop and review everything Brandon had told them. Several of Makayla's closest confidants said she had expressed, in the weeks leading up to her death, that she was not sure Brandon was as comfortable with the arrangement as he claimed. She said he was acting weird. Her friend Tasha Coleman told police during a recorded interview. She said he kept asking her questions. Where was she going? Who she was texting? She said it didn't feel open. It felt like he was watching her. And then there were the text messages. Modern homicide investigations live and die in the digital world, and the Makayla Meave case was no exception. Investigators obtained a warrant for both Brandon and Makayla's cell phone records within 48 hours of the death being classified as suspicious. What they extracted from those devices would become the spine of the entire prosecution. On Makayla's phone, detectives found a pattern of communication that told a story of a woman fully alive and fully engaged the night she died. Text messages to her friend Tasha at 9:14 p.m. showed her at a bar in Fort Worth. Photos geotagged at 10:02 p.m. showed her smiling, glass in hand, at a location 12 miles from her home. A message to D at 11:18 p.m. Reading simply heading home soon. She was alive, cognizant, and making plans as late as 11:18 p.m. She was dead before dawn, and her husband's phone told investigators exactly what he was doing while she was out. Brandon Meave's phone, extracted by a Tarrant County digital forensics specialist, revealed a cascade of activity throughout that evening, between 7:00 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. In Brown, he had conducted a series of internet searches that would become central to the prosecution's case. Among them, searches for how much alcohol does it take to kill someone, alcohol poisoning no marks, how long does alcohol poisoning take, and, most damningly, can you tell the difference between drunk and poisoned at autopsy? The searches were not from weeks earlier. They were not idle curiosity from months before. They were conducted the same evening his wife went out, the same evening she died. When detectives confronted Brandon with the search history during a second interview, he claimed his phone had been hacked. He said someone else must have used it. He said he had no explanation. He said he wanted a lawyer. The investigation shifted into a higher gear. While detectives were dismantling Brandon's story in the interrogation room, the Tarrant County medical examiner, Dr. Patricia Okafor, was conducting the autopsy that would either close the case or blow it wide open. Her initial findings appeared unremarkable. Makayla Meave was a healthy 29-year-old woman. There were no signs of blunt force trauma, no ligature marks, no indication of external violence. Her blood alcohol level came back at 0.19, elevated, but not at a level typically associated with fatal poisoning in a healthy adult. Then Dr. Okafor ran the extended toxicology screen. The results came back on March 19th, 16 days after Makayla's death, and they changed everything. The extended panel detected the presence of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, GHB, in Makayla's blood. GHB, commonly known as a date rape drug, is a central nervous system depressant. In combination with alcohol, even modest amounts can cause loss of consciousness, respiratory depression, and death. The levels found in Makayla's system, when calculated alongside her blood alcohol content, indicated a potentially lethal combination. GHB metabolizes quickly in the body, typically within 8 to 12 hours. The fact that it was still detectable at autopsy suggested it had been administered in the hours immediately preceding her death. It was not something she took recreationally and forgot about. It was not residual from a night out. The timing placed its administration within the window between her arriving home and her death. Dr. Okafor amended her initial finding. The cause of death was reclassified. Combined toxic effects of alcohol and GHB. The manner of death was reclassified. Homicide. Makayla Meave had not drunk herself to death. She had been poisoned. With a homicide ruling in hand, Mansfield PD brought in the Tarrant County District Attorney's Major Crimes Unit. Lead investigator Detective Marcus Holloway had worked homicide for 11 years, and he later told reporters that this case came together like a puzzle where someone had already told you what the picture was. You just had to find all the pieces. The first piece was the GHB itself. Where did it come from? Investigators subpoenaed purchase records, searched the Meave home again with a more targeted warrant, and cross-referenced Brandon's digital history with any platforms or vendors associated with the drug. What they found was not a direct purchase. GHB is a controlled substance and difficult to obtain through conventional channels, but something almost as useful. On Brandon Meave's laptop, forensic analysts discovered that he had accessed, on 4 separate occasions in February 2021, a dark web marketplace using the Tor browser. The browser history had been partially cleared, but digital forensics recovered enough to establish the access pattern. Investigators could not definitively link those sessions to the purchase of GHB, but they established that Brandon had the knowledge, intent, and technical capability to source it. Then investigators found something in the house that Brandon had apparently forgotten to get rid of. During the second search of the Meave property, investigators located a small glass vial tucked behind cleaning supplies beneath the kitchen sink. The vial was empty, but a chemical residue analysis conducted by the Texas Department of Public Safety Crime Lab returned a positive match for GHB. The vial was approximately the size of a single-dose container, consistent in volume and concentration, with the amount calculated to have been in Makayla's system. Brandon's fingerprints were on the vial. Makayla's were not. The theory, as it crystallized for investigators, was as follows. Brandon Meave had agreed to an open marriage he never wanted. As his wife moved deeper into a new life, going out, meeting other men, emotionally disengaging from the marriage, his resentment and rage built steadily over weeks. The night of March 2nd, 2021, when Makayla went out to see the man she'd been dating, Brandon Meave made his decision. He waited for her to come home, and when she did, he administered GHB, likely dissolved into a drink, knowing that combined with the alcohol already in her system, it would do what he needed it to do. Then he waited for morning. Then he called 911. Then he told investigators she had simply drunk too much. Brandon Meave was arrested on April 14th, 2021, 42 days after his wife's death. He was charged with first-degree murder. He bonded out within 72 hours and retained a defense attorney, Roger Castillo, a veteran criminal defense lawyer from Fort Worth with a record of high-profile acquittals. Castillo's strategy emerged quickly. He challenged the toxicology findings, arguing that GHB can occur naturally in the body after death, a known phenomenon called endogenous GHB production, and that the levels found in Makayla could not be definitively attributed to external administration. He challenged the provenance of the vial, arguing that the chain of custody during the second search was irregular, and he hammered on the open marriage narrative, suggesting that Makayla's active social life had exposed her to any number of unknown individuals who could have drugged her before she came home. It was a credible defense. But the prosecution had been preparing for every one of those arguments. To counter the endogenous GHB argument, the state brought in Dr. Alan Stern, a forensic toxicologist from Houston with 17 years of experience testifying in drug-related homicide cases. Dr. Stern testified that endogenous GHB post-mortem typically produces levels far lower than those detected in Makayla's blood, and that the concentration found, combined with the metabolic timeline, was inconsistent with natural production. It was, he stated, consistent with external administration at a dose intended to incapacitate. To counter the chain of custody argument on the vial, prosecutors produced a meticulous log of every handling from the moment of discovery to the crime lab. Judge Sarah Reyes ruled the vial and its analysis admissible. And to counter the defense's insinuation about unknown third parties, the prosecution presented something the defense had not fully anticipated: the surveillance footage. In the weeks following Brandon's arrest, investigators had canvassed every surveillance camera within a 2-mile radius of the Meave home. Neighboring properties, a convenience store at the end of the street, a Ring doorbell camera from a house 3 doors down, all of it was collected and reviewed. The Ring doorbell footage from the neighbor's property at 2:12 a.m. on March 3rd showed Makayla Meave walking alone, steadily and upright, up the street toward her home. She had been filmed returning from the bar of her own volition without assistance, exhibiting no signs of severe impairment. This directly undermined the defense's suggestion that she had been drugged before leaving the bar. She walked into that house on her own 2 feet. She never walked out. A second piece of surveillance footage, this one from the convenience store, showed Brandon Meave's vehicle in the parking lot at 11:04 p.m. on March the 2nd. He was captured on the store's exterior camera, entering and purchasing a bottle of water, and notably, a small juice bottle. He was alone. The timestamp placed this purchase over an hour before Makayla arrived home. Prosecutors argued that this footage was consistent with Brandon preparing the vehicle or the vessel through which the GHB would be administered. It placed him awake, mobile and active during a period he had told investigators he was asleep. When defense attorney Castillo cross-examined investigators on this point, he suggested it was equally consistent with a man who couldn't sleep and made a routine trip for a late-night drink. The jury would have to decide which interpretation they believed. The human testimony at trial was devastating to the defense in ways that no physical evidence could fully replicate. Makayla's friends, her sister, and the man she had been seeing all took the stand, and collectively they painted a picture of a woman who had been quietly afraid of her husband in the weeks before her death. Dasha Coleman, Makayla's closest friend, testified for over 3 hours. She described a phone call she received from Makayla on February 21st, 10 days before the death, in which Makayla told her that Brandon had read through her messages without permission. She said he told her he was fine with everything, but she could tell he wasn't. She said she was starting to think about leaving him. She was scared about how he'd react. Makayla's sister, Dana Horton, testified that Makayla had confided about Brandon's controlling behavior going back to 2019, well before the open marriage arrangement. Dana described incidents of Brandon monitoring Makayla's location through shared phone apps, checking her call logs, and periodically cutting off her access to their joint bank account when he was displeased with her behavior. The open marriage, prosecutors argued, was never an agreement. It was a trap, a test, and Makayla had failed it simply by believing it was real. The man identified as D, later identified in court records as Daniel Reyes, also testified. Reyes, visibly emotional, described his relationship with Makayla as genuine and developing. He confirmed their last communication at 11:18 p.m., the night of her death. He stated unequivocally that he had not seen her in person that evening. He had been at home in Dallas, and cell tower data confirmed his alibi. His testimony eliminated the final credible alternative the defense had been constructing, that Makayla had met someone that night who had drugged her. The cell data, the surveillance footage, and Reyes' own account all converged on the same conclusion. Makayla had come home alone. Whatever happened to her had happened inside the house she shared with her husband. Roger Castillo was a skilled attorney, and he was not finished. In his closing argument, delivered over 4 hours across 2 days, he attacked every pillar of the prosecution's case with methodical force. He reminded the jury that no one had witnessed Brandon Meave administer anything to his wife. He reminded them that the presence of GHB in her system, while suspicious, was not itself proof of how it got there. He reminded them that Brandon had no criminal history, no history of violence, no previous incidents involving law enforcement. He reminded them that a man conducting internet searches, however disturbing those searches might be, had not committed a crime by searching. The state wants you to convict a man of first-degree murder on the basis of a Google search and a vial that could have been placed by anyone in a house that was searched twice. Castillo told the jury, "Udbray, that is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That is suspicion. And in this country we do not convict people of murder on suspicion." It was a powerful argument. And for 48 hours during deliberations, it appeared it might be working. The jury deliberated for 2 full days. 12 people locked in a room with 900 pages of evidence. toxicology reports, digital forensics analyses, surveillance stills, and the testimonies of 17 witnesses. Jurors later told reporters that the deliberations were contentious, with at least 2 jurors initially holding out for a lesser charge of manslaughter or even acquittal. What broke the deadlock, multiple jurors said, was a return to a single piece of evidence, the vial beneath the sink. Specifically, it was the absence of Makayla's fingerprints. If the vial had been placed there by anyone who visited the house, as the defense suggested, and if Makayla herself had any knowledge of or interaction with it, some trace of her would likely be present. There was nothing, only Brandon's prints, perfectly placed on a vial of the drug that had killed his wife. On November 9th of 2022, 20 months after Makayla Meave was found dead on the floor of her bedroom, the jury in State of Texas v. Brandon James Meave returned to the courtroom of Judge Sarah Reyes in Fort Worth. The courtroom was packed. Makayla's mother and sister sat in the front row of the gallery, holding hands. Brandon Meave sat rigidly at the defense table in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable, as it had been throughout the trial. He had never testified in his own defense. He had sat through every piece of evidence, every photograph of his wife's body, every description of her final hours, without visible reaction. The jury foreperson, a retired schoolteacher from Burleson, the same town where Makayla had grown up, rose and read the verdict in a clear, steady voice. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Brandon Meave did not move. His attorney placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. In the gallery, Makayla's mother collapsed against her daughter, sobbing without sound. Dana Horton gripped the railing in front of her and closed her eyes. Judge Reyes polled each juror individually, a formality that confirmed what everyone in the courtroom already knew. All 12, one by one, confirmed their verdict. Guilty, 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 12 times. In the sentencing phase that followed 2 days later, the jury recommended the maximum, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Judge Reyes accepted the recommendation and imposed the sentence on November 11, 2022. Brandon James Meave was remanded immediately into custody and transferred to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where he would spend the rest of his life. As he was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, he said nothing. He did not turn toward the gallery. He did not look at the family of the woman he had married, deceived, and killed. He walked through the door to the holding area and was gone. Makayla Meave had been 29 years old. She had wanted a different life. She had made the mistake of believing the man she married would let her have one.